All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh by Hashem, Yahweh Shai by Hashem, Ruach HaKodesh, double honors to the apostles, the bishops and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well, and peace and salutation unto the hopeful elect, the 1/3 of Yashar Allah, upholding the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of their ability. Peace and salutation. This is the brother Bakwasha, and I want to play this quick video here. And essentially, what has been happening since the beginning of 2025, there has been a new agenda of overriding the current government structure and the systems that are tied to that government structure. And because these structures have been in place for so long, there has been a deliberate and intentional coup of corporate entities, specifically in the tech arena, to pirate the quote unquote American people, while also imploding the corporation of America and bringing it to a third world country status, while also imploding the USD, while instituting massive layoffs, while incorporating artificial intelligence and automation, as well as inflation. And so all of these things are written in the scriptures as far as these government entities now becoming less of a democracy, which initially was sold as a bill of goods for the people, now is being compiled and congregated into the hands of the global elites. And so what this does, while all of these scenarios are happening, mass confusion is occurring, which is a weapon that has been used across the globe, but specifically here in America, as a form of control of the people. And so I want to play this video. It's really going to summarize everything in which I just said. But before I do that, let me start off here in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33. It says, "For Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints." For Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shai is not the author of confusion. Okay? And matter of fact, let's grab that word here, confusion. Okay? Because I really just want to hit a couple of highlights, and then I'll leave some of these links in the description box. And Lord will, this would be edifying. But let's grab this word here for confusion.
Strong's G 181, Akatastasia. Akatastasia.
It says a state of disorder, instability, disturbance, disorder, commotion, confusion, tumult. Okay? So when the scriptures say Yahweh Shem Yahushua is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints, there's order and then there's chaos. We are living in a time where chaos is a form of wine philosophies that now are altering the minds of the people. And really, I just bring all of this up to show how wicked this society is, how corrupt it is. And it's a takeover, okay? But it's a takeover of the old regime. Now is entering in the new regime of the new tech automation giants, okay? And these giants in themselves, okay, are to bring in more confusion, which is going to bring in more instability, which is going to bring in ultimately the MO to the T to the B. Because through confusion, people are paralyzed. And this also leads back to Esau's problem, reaction, solution. So Esau is always going to continue to promote problems, okay, to where he can get the reaction that he's looking for to provide the ultimate solution, which is more and more forms of entrapment and enslavement, which is his ultimate or absolute goal of power. Okay? As scripture says, he wants to be like the Most High. Okay? This is Isaiah chapter 14, verse 14. It says, I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. Now, this is going into Esau's space program, things of that sort. But it, like the Most High, is Esau's God complex. Okay? Scripture also says, I will sit in the seat of God. Okay? This is Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 2. Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am God. I sit in the seat of God, in the midst of the seas, yet thou art a man and not God, though thou set thine heart as the heart of God. So Esau has a God complex, and that's why these control mechanisms have been set in place, but no longer under the quote unquote Constitution or any of these written laws, now ultimately transitioning into a monarch establishment. So let's read a little bit more. Matter of fact, let's just play the video.
The author of Offshore Capital Without Borders, who has been writing about these very issues, including this big piece in the Atlantic in November and the oligarchy issues that I mentioned. Professor Harrington, explain.
Well, thank you for having me here. I think what the American people need to understand that hasn't been covered well by mass media is that our government is in the process of experiencing a hostile takeover. And it's not just by business elites in general, but by a faction of business elites who have a very specific political program that is, as you said, years in the making. It didn't come out of Musk's head. It didn't come out of nowhere, but it has been developed over decades. And it calls itself the new monarchy, the new monarchism. And
the new monarchy, the new monarchism. Monarch goes into king, okay? Matter of fact, let's just grab that definition. It says monarch.
Monarch.
It says a sovereign head of state, especially a king, queen, or emperor. So no longer a democracy of the Senate and, you know, the judicial branches, the executive, the legislative branches. No longer that. Ultimate dictatorship. Okay? Overriding or absolute power, which is absolute corruption. Okay?
The new monarchy, the new monarchism, and it neo-reactionary belief systems militate against democracy. What they want is to replace democracy as we've known it with corporate monarchy, in which CEOs are rulers, and that's really what we saw at the inauguration. That front row in which you pointed out those corporate CEOs were placed in front of cabinet members. That is to signify this new nobility that's going to rule over us. And I don't think people have
I'm jumping in to ask you to build on that, because when people hear that, sometimes they think, well, monarch, autocrat, it sounds extreme to the American ear. And yet, can you educate us about what your work has found about how many of these people routinely...
Now look at them. Musk, I think this is Bezos. This is, I believe, one of the top CEOs for, I believe, Google. One of the two, or there's another big name company, Meta, right? And then whoever these, scoundrels are, but all of them, okay, placed in front of quote unquote elected officials. These are just corporate entities, okay?
American ear. And yet, can you educate us about what your work has found about how many of these people routinely operate and thrive in other parts of the world with autocratic governments? So what might sound even like rhetoric to a casual news listener, perhaps, in their case is, of course, they know how to work with China, and they sometimes might find it better for their companies.
Yeah, you're right. This process of learning to disregard the formal mechanisms of government is something that many of these CEOs have trained on doing outside the U.S., and now they're kind of bringing it back home. Long ago, there was a Martinican poet and political theorist named Aimé Césaire, and he coined this idea of an imperial boomerang. He basically says whatever an empire does overseas to the colonized people eventually swings back and lands on imperial shores. And basically, for years, we've had this kind of corporate imperialism advancing American power overseas, and many of the techniques and tactics and political beliefs they've honed from that process are boomeranging back to American shores right now.
Right. Yeah. 400 years, and it's the same philosophy, as some say. Jason, your thoughts on all the above?
I love this concept, and I think it's very important for Americans to understand. You can say all oligarchs are bad, which I think there's a reasonable argument to be made, but these are not people. The Elon Musk, the Zuckerbergs, the Peter Thiels, they're not motivated by a long-term future and benevolence. They're not trying to create universities and foundations where their name will carry on. In many respects, they're nihilists. They think that humanity is over. They think the only way that we can transcend is through their brilliance. These guys present themselves like Tony Stark, right? But they're really more like Rick Sanchez and Rick and Morty. They're sad, addicted people who may be brilliant in their own right, but you don't want them running anything. And so we see that with the way that Elon Musk handled Twitter. We see that with Mark Zuckerberg saying, yeah, I learned how to be a real man because I started doing mixed martial arts. Dude, you're 40-something years old. You're just figuring out how to be a man. All of these things would be fine if these guys were just in therapy or they were only podcasters. But once they start having an influence on policy, that kind of use of policy to fulfill whatever gaps are going on with inside of you is not a smart way to run a country. And that's what people need to be aware of when they're voting for anybody who wants to stand next to these men.
So essentially, the Zuckerbergs, the Musk, okay, are all here to bring more confusion to the people. And ultimately, through that confusion, rule in a way in which technology is now the highest form of control. No longer government. Okay? Real quick, this is 2nd Ezra 8:50. For many great miseries shall be done to them that in the latter time shall dwell in the world, because they have walked in great pride. And really, that's what that image is of those CEOs. It's prideful for Babylon to even rule, but then now doubling down on that pride, more and more miseries are going to come to this place. I already talked about inflation. I already talked about layoffs, right? There's going to be restrictions as far as places you can go. There's going to be universal basic income because of this great pride. Okay, let's read one more. This is 2nd Ezra 16 verse 21. Behold, victuals shall be so good cheap upon earth that they shall think themselves to be in good case. And even then shall evils grow upon earth, sword, famine, and great confusion. Because people are still looking to the government, number one, as a form of authority. But that form of authority wants to be like Yahweh Shemi Yahushai. They want to be like the Most High. They want to sit in the seat of Yahweh Shemi Yahushai. They want to be God. But not God to promote life, but to destroy. Okay? That's what the scripture talks about. The thief cometh not but to steal and to kill and destroy. And that's exactly what the culmination is going to be of this technocracy. And there's a couple of other words. So if Akim can hold tight, maybe another 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to get to a couple of, I'll call them articles, but just some definitions that really give an outline of the play-by-play, which is occurring in the backdrop. Because what we're seeing at the forefront are all just a playbook of things that have been written well before it's been shown here in 2025. And the reason why that is because these tech giants, these big corporations have already been planning to take over Babylon, aka America. Okay? So let's look at this word here. And I want to pronounce it correctly.
Corporatocracy.
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 Corporatocracy. Okay? Corporatocracy is an economic, political, and judicial system controlled or influenced by business, corporations, or corporate interest. The only thing that's missing here is tech. Okay? Controlled or influenced. So this is now going to be over, quote unquote, government authority. Okay? But it's for the purpose of ushering in the MO to the T to the B. Okay. Now, and I'm gonna get back to this part of the video, but I want to kind of set up some things before we get to that. Now, this is from Wikipedia. Forms of corporatocracy. Corporatocracy can manifest in different forms, varying according to the degree of involvement of corporations in the political and social sphere. For example, crony capitalism, in which corporations obtain favors and privileges from the state in exchange for funding or political support. Conveyance capitalism, in which corporations collude with each other to form oligopolies. And we're going to get this word here too, or here it is. An oligopoly is a market in which pricing controls lies in the hands of a few sellers. So there's a monopoly and then there's an oligopoly. Okay. And all of these oligopolies are tech based. Okay. Because the digital society is going to be ran by tech, no longer government, because accessibility is going to be through tech. Okay. Which in essence doesn't have regulation. That's why the internet in itself is a scapegoat for unrestriction or new legislation in a space where government policy cannot rule. It says in which corporations collude with each other to form oligopolies, oligopolies, my goodness, or cartels, limiting competition and influencing market rules. Authoritarian capitalism, in which corporations ally themselves with repressive or anti-democratic political regimes, benefiting from protection and impunity. Inverted totalitarianism, theorized by Wolin, a system where economic powers like corporations exert subtle but substantial power over a system that superficially seems democratic. Now, that's a lot of words. It's a lot of definitions. Pause this video, go back, look them up, read them. But ultimately, corporations come together in the form of tech to now usurp the power of the quote unquote government system, which will now be the way to the internet of everything. Okay. Now, there's one more article here, and then I'm gonna play the rest of this video. But I just wanted to jump to a couple of things as far as what happens when you have this corporatocracy. Okay. It says, and totalitarianism, because this goes into the inverted totalitarianism. Let's see here. Let's start here. It says the people. While the classical totalitarianism regimes aimed at the constant political mobilization of the populace, inverted totalitarianism aims for the mass of the populace to be in a persistent state of political apathy. What is a state of political apathy? In political science, political apathy is a lack of interest or apathy towards politics. This includes voter apathy, information apathy, and lack of interest in elections, political events, public meetings, and voting. Voter apathy is a lack of interest among voters in the elections of representative democracies. Why is that important? That is important because now, because of that lack of political involvement, whatever that may be, these corporate entities now make decisions on behalf of the people that were not even involved anyway. So for an example, it wasn't a vote. It wasn't a vote for society to go from analog to digital. Just like it's not going to be a vote for universal basic income. It's not going to be a vote. All of these things are going to be mandated, which is the reason why it's leading into a monarch society. No longer democracy. Okay? And one way in which you do that is by the implosion of jobs. Okay? It says, the only type of political activity expected or desired from the citizenry is voting. Low electoral turnouts are favorably received as an indication that the bulk of the populace has given up hope that the government will ever significantly help them. Punishment. While the classical totalitarian regimes punished harshly, imprisoning or killing political or ideological opponents and scapegoats, inverted totalitarianism in particular punishes by the means of an economy of fear, minimizing social security, busting unions, outdating skills, outsourcing jobs, and so on. So all of this is just leading to the downfall of this society, but now in the structure of a monarch, no longer a democracy, a complete dictatorship. Okay? Yeah, let's read the leader part. It says, while the classical totalitarian regimes had charismatic leaders that were the architects of the state, inverted totalitarianism does not depend on a certain leader, but produces its leaders who are akin to corporate leaders. Okay? So Elon buying X, Meta, Zuckerberg having all of the societal input. Can you imagine? You got Elon with all of the X and Tesla and all of that data, and then you got then you got Zuckerberg with all of the Meta data. And all of that accessibility is in their control. All of the regulations are within their control. And now they're doing the same thing to the quote unquote US government. All right. So one more and then we'll be back to the video. Okay. It says, according to Wolin, the United States has two main totalizing dynamics. The first, directed outward, finds its expression in the global war on terror and the Bush doctrine that the United States has the right to launch preemptive wars. Wolin and Hedges argue that this amounts to the U.S. seen as illegitimate the attempt by any state to resist its domination. The second dynamic, directed inward, involves the subjection of the mass of the populace to economic rationalization with continual downsizing and outsourcing of jobs abroad and dismantling of what remains of the welfare state created by FDR's New Deal and LBJ's Great Society. Neoliberalism is an integral component of inverted totalitarianism. The state of insecurity in which this places the public serves the useful function of making people feel helpless, therefore making it less likely they will become politically active and thus helping maintain the first dynamic, which is ultimately dictatorship. The tech giants, corporate giants ruling the people. Okay? So that was a long drawn out way of leading back into this video. And Lord will, I'll leave the links to these articles because I have one more I want to share. But it just shows that all of this was a design. This isn't anything that's just happening organically. This is happening intentionally. Okay? So let's bring it back a little bit.
With Mark Zuckerberg saying, yeah, I learned how to be a real man because I started doing mixed martial arts. Dude, you're 40-something years old. You're just figuring out how to be a man. All of these things would be fine if these guys were just in therapy or they were only podcasters. But once they start having an influence on policy, that kind of use of policy to fulfill whatever gaps are going on with inside of you is not a smart way to run a country. And that's what people need to be aware of when they're voting for anybody who wants to stand next to these men.
Professor Jason, being the fellow erudite, nerdy scholar that he is, brings up Rick and Morty. Rick Sanchez in that great sci-fi cartoon, addressing sort of the mob, says, I welcome your boos because I've seen what you cheer for. And you look at some of what has gone viral in the political space, whether it's some of the sort of toxic one-sided stuff Jason mentioned, or these greater and greater appeals to philosophies that say maybe democracy doesn't matter, or it doesn't matter if your side's not winning. How do you look at that effect, specifically in the American body politic, Professor Harrington, when these tools and platforms are pushing quite clearly some of those things to be more mainlined or popular?
Well, what Musk is really doing here is mainlining this neo-reactionary philosophy that says not only that democracy doesn't matter, but that it's dead, and that we're just deciding what to do with the body.
Right.
And that what should be done is that high T alpha males, that's just a pseudoscientific gloss on the divine right of kings, by the way. That's no different from saying, mon Dieu et mon droit, as the British nobility used to say. They believe that democracy is dead, and that they are not only the best and the brightest, but they're born that way to rule over the rest of us. And what Musk has been doing with Doge is enacting quite systematically the manifesto written by the philosopher king of this neo-reactionary movement. His name is Curtis Yarvin, and he was profiled in the New York Times Magazine a couple